As we've all been acquainted with how congressional debate now works, we're now going to go into some of the more specifics on how to actually write a congressional debate speech. So to put it in a more simpler way, congressional debate speeches are basically incorporating the research skills you learn from day one and the persuasive speaking skills you learn from day two into a format that's more adaptable for congressional debate. So this is the most basic format of a congressional debate speech. We have an introduction followed by two body paragraphs and then ending off with a conclusion. And just for reference, a contention is just basically a paragraph that summarizes your argument. So your introduction should have an attention-getting device or an AGD. The main purpose of an introduction is to hook your audience and make sure they continue listening and are engaged as you start presenting your actual argument. So it's essential to have that AGD. It should be approximately 1 to 3 sentences. It should be a story, comment, or joke, or that's funny, interesting, introspective, or emotional. Literally anything that'll just get the attention of the audience and ensure they're captivated as you go through the rest of your speech. So this AGD should be related to the legislation or be paired with a linking sentence that explains how your story is relevant to the topic we're discussing or to your argument. It's pretty simple. All you really need to do is get the attention of the audience and connect it back to the argument you're making or connect it back to the legislation. So this is how to write a contention. We'll only be going over this once because contention 1 and contention 2 have the exact same structure. Just to re-clarify, a contention is simply a paragraph that explains and summarizes your argument. So we'll be going with this six-part format to ensure that your argument stays organized and concise, so it's as persuasive as possible for your audience. So your contention should start out with a claim, and this is just a short tagline that summarizes your argument that says, because of this, this is going to happen. Because A exists, B will happen. Basically, one sentence to summarize this entire paragraph, just so your audience knows what to expect as you go through your logic. Finally, then we come to the warrant, which is the reasoning that makes your claim true. This is if we go from A to B, your warrant is how we get from A to B. Then we have your two data points. So these could be quotes, statistics, analysis, or any other data from a reputable source to add credibility to your logic. So your warrant already describes the logical process you go from A to B, right? But you need some other external reputable source to say that other people are thinking this and that there's real life statistics and data to back up the argument you're making. Finally, we come to the impact. The impact is the most important thing in Congress. Because you are simulating a representative, it's your job to convince everyone else in the chamber that what you're saying matters and what you're saying has some actual significance. So it's important that you have a really strong impact to convince those that are listening to your argument. So we'll do this in a two-pronged approach. We'll first have your logical impact, which is just a statement that describes the logical reasoning of your argument and its significance. And finally, most importantly, arguably, is your human impact. Because you're a representative, you're responsible for constituents, which are the people that voted you into office. And these are humans, and as well as the people who are listening to your argument are humans. And because of this, if you have an argument that's touches individual humans, how your argument affects individual lives, the other humans listening to your argument are better able to empathize with your argument. And this is a really effective strategy for convincing your audience. Because if you can show how your argument isn't just some lofty, over generalized argument, but rather something that impacts individual lives, other people can empathize with it better and your argument will be more persuasive. So you really need to finish off your contention with a statement describing how it impacts individual human lives and the greater societal significance of your argument. So let's use one of the bills from this week's bill packet to kind of demonstrate this. Let's go with the minimum wage bill. This bill is to increase the minimum wage from $7.50 to $15 incrementally over a couple of years. So let's say I make the claim that increasing the minimum wage to $15 will cut jobs. So I went from A to B. I identified my A, increasing the minimum wage will do what? B, and that's cut jobs. My warrant, which is my reasoning that makes this true, is that small businesses will be forced to fire employees. So I can start with my first data point, let's say from the New York Times, a highly reputable source, saying that 70% of small businesses are financially unstable. And then my second data point could be analysis by the Washington Post, another reputable source, saying that small businesses tend to fire people when they are short on money. So my logical impact in this case would be that putting business owners in financially precarious situations where they have to pay more money for the same stuff will cause them to fire employees. And then the human impact will be that the small communities and rural communities that rely on the jobs from small businesses will be devastated by increasing the minimum wage. As you see, we identified the claim that we're going to cut, that this is going to cut jobs. We identified the warrant that this is because small businesses will be forced to lay off employees. We found two reputable sources to back up my logic. We identified the logic behind it that's saying that small businesses just won't have enough money and they'll be forced to fire employees. And then finally, we come to the human impact by saying that small communities, rural communities that depend on small businesses will be devastated by a lack of employment that comes from this legislation. So as you see, by sticking to the six-part format, we slowly walked our audience through my argument and then finally ended off with a strong impact that convinced them that they should care and that my argument holds significance. And then again, you should do this for contention one and then repeat this exact same structure for contention two. Finally, we come to the conclusion. So you should start your conclusion with just quick two sentences summarizing your previous two contentions, just to remind the audience what you've been talking about for the past 2 minutes. And then finally, you should end off with 2 to 3 sentences reiterating and re-explaining the significance of your argument. Since Congress is all about impact, it's really important in the last 20 to 30 seconds of your speech that you really emphasize why people should care about the points you're making. And that's how you're going to really convince other people and your audience and your judges that your argument is better than anyone else's if you take the final last time to re-emphasize how important it is what you're talking about. So just for ease of convenience, we've outlined this full template for you guys, starting with the individual parts of the introduction, the individual contentions, and finally the conclusion. So as you're starting to research your bills, as you're starting to write your speeches, just be mindful of this format and then start subbing in information as you come up with introductions, as you think of funny introductions, as you think of good arguments, and finally when you're done with all that, putting in your conclusion to end off your speech. And then I've also provided this simplified template, which is introduction, claim warrant impact, and conclusion. And I emphasize claim warrant impact because these are the three most important things in Congress, is to highlight the three most important questions in Congress. What's going to happen, why is it going to happen, and why I should care. Every argument in congressional debate should answer these three questions. For example, let's look back at the minimum wage example I gave and that argument I made. What's going to happen in that? We're going to lose jobs. Why is it going to happen? Small businesses won't be able to afford employees. And why should I care? Small communities and rural communities will be devastated by this bill. So as you can see, my argument is now logically sound, and I know this to be true because I checked it against claim warrant impact. I identified the claim, what's going to happen, I identified the warrant, why is it going to happen, and I identified the impact of why I should care. So let's look through a couple examples of this. Let's say I have the topic of ice cream. I make a claim that ice cream is bad for your health. Why is that true? Because ice cream contains a lot of sugar. And why should I care about that? Because excess sugar leads to obesity and cardiovascular problems. Let's look at something a little bit more along the lines of congressional debate, banning fossil fuels. I can make the claim that banning fossil fuels will lower carbon emissions. Why is this going to be true? Is that if we stop burning fossil fuels, we'll stop emitting carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. And why should I care? We slow the impact of global warming. And then finally, let's look at the topic of legalizing marijuana. My claim is that legalizing marijuana will lower crime. Why is this true? Is that legalizing marijuana means that people don't buy and spend money and give money towards dangerous drug cartels. And why should I care about that? That leads to less drug violence, less drug crimes, and safer communities. So it's important to remember as you're looking at bills, researching, and putting the final touches on your completed speeches, never forget claim warrant impact. It's a super helpful tool to make sure that you're on the right track when coming up with arguments. Whenever you think of an argument, always go back to claim warrant impact. Is what I'm saying, do I identify what happens? why it happens, and why I should care. And you should check yourself at every step of the way of developing your argument, incorporating into your speech to make sure that you have a claim warrant impact. Because while the data will be there to add some credibility, you can't really add anything credible to an argument that doesn't work. And that's only works if you have the claim warrant impact. So now that you guys know how to write a congressional debate speech and understand the idea of claim warrant impact, you're all ready to start looking at the bills and start developing and writing your final speeches that will be used on the competition on Friday. Again, let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out to your counselors and those during office hours for any help on writing speeches. So good luck.